In a small village in South Africa, KwaZulu-Natal, there lived a young woman named Amina. Amina was a healer, known for her skills in treating wounds and illnesses. She lived with her husband, Kofi, in the year 1999. One day, while gathering herbs near a mysterious stone circle, Amina heard a strange humming sound. Curious, she touched one of the stones and suddenly felt dizzy. When she opened her eyes, she found herself in a different time and place. Amina was now in the year 1743, in a village she did not recognize. The people wore different clothes and spoke in a dialect she barely understood. Confused and scared, Amina tried to find her way back home. As she wandered, she encountered a group of warriors. One of them, a tall and strong man named Juma, noticed her and approached. Juma organized a force for war, especially on land. Juma was chosen as the chief warrior due to his courage and resolution. According to one story told by the villagers, he had once stood his ground against a leopard attacking his herd. He single-handedly killed the leopard, thus earning the praise from his village. When he became the chief warrior, he changed the way the battles were fought, which made him a more effective warrior. He stayed with his mother but wasn't married. Juma saw that Amina was not from their time. He decided to help her, but he had to be careful. The village was preparing for a big conflict, and strangers were not always welcome. Juma took Amina to his village, where she met the chief, Mosi. Mosi was suspicious of Amina, but when she healed one of the injured warriors, he began to trust her. As days passed, Amina and Juma grew closer. Juma was kind and brave, and Amina felt a strong connection with him. However, she missed Kofi and her life in 1999. She was torn between her love for Juma and her desire to return home. The village was also facing a threat from a rival tribe, and Amina had to decide where her loyalties lay. One night, Juma and Amina sat by the fire, talking about their lives. Juma shared stories of his battles and dreams for peace. Amina listened, feeling a mix of emotions. She wanted to help Juma and his people, but she also longed for her own time. As they talked, they heard drums in the distance. The rival tribe was approaching. Juma and the warriors prepared for battle. Amina used her healing skills to tend to the wounded. The conflict was intense, and Amina feared for Juma's safety. She realized how much she cared for him and the village. Despite the danger, she stayed by Juma's side, helping in any way she could. After the battle, the village celebrated their victory. Amina felt a sense of belonging, but she knew her journey was not over. She still needed to find a way back home. Juma promised to help her, even though it meant saying goodbye. They searched for clues about the stone circle and its powers. One day, while exploring the forest, Amina and Juma found an old woman who knew about the stones. She told them that the stones could send Amina back, but only if she made a great sacrifice. Amina was torn apart. She loved Juma and the village, but she also missed Kofi and her old life. As Amina pondered her decision, the village faced another threat. This time, it was a natural disaster. Amina used her knowledge to help the villagers prepare and survive. Her bravery and skills earned her the respect of everyone, including Mosi. She felt more connected to the village than ever before. In the end, Amina had to choose between staying with Juma or returning to Kofi. It was the hardest decision of her life. Amina stood by the stone circle, holding Juma's hand. She felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She loved Juma and the village, but she also missed Kofi and her old life. The old woman had said she needed to make a great sacrifice to return home. Amina took a deep breath and looked into Juma's eyes. "I have to go back," she said softly. "But I will never forget you." Juma nodded, his eyes filled with sadness. "I understand, Amina. You must follow your heart." With a heavy heart, Amina touched the stone again. The humming sound grew louder, and she felt herself being pulled away. When she opened her eyes, she was back in 1999, standing in the same spot where she had disappeared. Kofi was there, looking worried. "Amina, where have you been?" Kofi exclaimed, rushing to her side. Amina hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "It's a long story, Kofi. But I'm home now." As the days passed, Amina tried to adjust to her old life. She continued her work as a doctor, but her thoughts often drifted back to Juma and the village. She wondered how they were doing and if they had survived the threats they faced. Amina felt a deep sense of longing and sadness. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, Amina heard a familiar humming sound. She rushed outside and saw the stone circle glowing. Her heart raced. Was it possible to go back? She touched the stone, and once again, she felt dizzy. When she opened her eyes, she was back in 1743 in the village. Juma was there, waiting for her. He smiled when he saw her. "Amina, you came back." Amina ran to him and hugged him tightly. "I couldn't stay away, Juma. I missed you and the village." Juma held her close. We missed you too, Amina. The village is not the same without you. Amina felt a sense of relief and happiness. She was back where she belonged. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them with Juma by her side. Amina and Juma stood together, feeling the warmth of their reunion. The village was bustling with activity as people prepared for the upcoming harvest festival. Amina was excited to be part of the celebrations and to help the villagers with her healing skills. As the festival approached, strange things began to happen in the village. Crops started to wither, and animals fell ill. The villagers were worried and turned to Amina for help. She worked tirelessly, using her knowledge of herbs and remedies, but the problems persisted. One evening, an elder named Nia approached Amina and Juma. There is a legend, Nia said, about a hidden cave in the mountains. It is said to hold a powerful medicine that can heal any ailment. But the journey is dangerous, and no one has ever returned. Amina and Juma exchanged determined looks. We have to try, Amina said. The village depends on us. The next morning, they set out on their journey. The path was steep and treacherous, but they pressed on, determined to find the cave. Along the way, they faced many challenges. They crossed raging rivers, climbed rocky cliffs, and navigated dense forests. Each obstacle tested their strength and courage. One night, as they rested by a fire, they heard rustling in the bushes. A group of bandits emerged, their eyes gleaming with greed. Give us your supplies, the leader demanded, brandishing a knife. Juma stepped forward, ready to defend Amina. We have nothing of value, he said calmly. We are on a mission to save our village. The bandits laughed, but Amina spoke up. Please, let us pass. We mean no harm. The leader hesitated, then lowered his knife. Very well, he said. But be careful. The mountains are full of dangers. Relieved, Amina and Juma continued their journey. They finally reached the entrance of the cave, hidden behind a waterfall. Inside, they found glowing crystals and ancient carvings on the walls. In the center of the cave was a small pool of shimmering water. This must be it, Amina whispered. She filled a flask with the water and carefully sealed it. As they made their way back to the village, they encountered more challenges. A fierce storm battered them, and they had to take shelter in a cave. They faced wild animals and treacherous terrain, but their determination never wavered. When they finally returned to the village, they were greeted with cheers and relief. Amina used the water from the cave to heal the crops and animals. The village thrived once more, and the harvest festival was a joyous celebration. Amina and Juma stood together, watching the villagers dance and sing. They knew that more adventures awaited them, but for now, they were content. They had faced great challenges and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. Kofi noticed that Amina's disappearance had been longer this time. She had spoken about the mysterious rocks before, and he began to suspect that they held the key to her travels. Determined to find out the truth, Kofi made plans to go through the rocks himself. He didn't know how he would manage it, but he was determined to try. Meanwhile, Kofi had managed to find his way through the stones. He emerged in 1743, but in a different part of the land. He was captured by a rival tribe and, through his strength and leadership, he eventually became their leader. He had no idea that Amina was also in this time. One day, Amina went to the field to gather more herbs. As she worked, she was suddenly surrounded by warriors from the rival tribe. They accused her of being a spy and captured her. Amina was taken to their village, where she was brought before their leader. To her shock, the leader was Kofi. But he was not the Kofi she remembered. Amina's heart pounded as she was brought before him. Kofi, she whispered, her voice trembling. Kofi looked at her with cold, unrecognizing eyes. He was dressed in the attire of the rival tribe and carried himself with the authority of a captain. Who is this woman? He asked, his eyes narrowing. Amina felt a wave of confusion and fear. Kofi didn't recognize her. He seemed to be a different person entirely. The resemblance was strong, but his demeanor was harsh and unfamiliar. Amina wondered if he was pretending, but his expression showed no sign of recognition. I am Amina, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I am a healer from a nearby village. Kofi's gaze remained hard. Why were you in our territory? He demanded. Amina struggled to find the right words. I was gathering herbs. I mean no harm. Kofi turned to his warriors. Take her to the holding area. We will decide her fate later. As Amina was led away, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. How could Kofi not remember her? She was placed in a small hut, guarded by 2 warriors. She sat down, her mind racing with thoughts and questions. Meanwhile, back in her village, Juma heard the news that Amina had been taken captive by the rival tribe. His heart sank. He knew he had to rescue her, but it would be dangerous. He gathered a group of trusted warriors and made a plan to infiltrate the rival village. As night fell, Juma and his men set out. They moved silently through the forest, avoiding patrols and staying hidden. When they reached the rival village, they waited for the right moment to strike. Juma's mind was focused on one thing: saving Amina. Inside the hut, Amina tried to stay calm. She thought about Juma and hoped he would come for her. She also thought about Kofi and the strange transformation he had undergone. She couldn't understand how he could forget her so completely. Suddenly, the door to the hut opened and Kofi entered. He looked at Amina with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "You say you are a healer," he said. "Prove it." Amina nodded, trying to hide her fear. "Bring me someone who is injured or ill, and I will help them." Kofi called for one of his men, who brought in a young boy with a fever. Amina examined the boy and quickly prepared a remedy from the herbs she had with her. She administered the medicine and spoke soothingly to the boy, who soon began to show signs of improvement. Kofi watched closely, his expression unreadable. "You are skilled," he said finally. "But that does not explain why you were in our territory." Amina took a deep breath. "I was only gathering herbs. I did not know I was crossing into your land." Kofi seemed to consider her words. "Very well," he said. "You will remain here until we decide what to do with you." As Kofi left the hut, Amina felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps she could find a way to reach him, to make him remember who he truly was. But for now, she had to wait and hope that Juma would come to her rescue. Juma and his warriors waited in the shadows, watching the rival village. They knew they had to be careful and strategic to avoid detection. Juma's heart was heavy with worry for Amina, but he remained focused on the task at hand. As night fell, Juma signaled to his men. They moved silently through the village, avoiding patrols and staying hidden. Juma had learned the layout of the village from previous encounters, and he led his men to the hut where Amina was being held. Inside the hut, Amina sat quietly, her mind racing with thoughts of escape. She heard a faint rustling outside and her heart leaped with hope. The door creaked open, and Juma slipped inside, followed by a few of his warriors. "Amina," Juma whispered, rushing to her side. "We're here to get you out." Amina's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Juma, I knew you would come." Juma helped Amina to her feet. "We need to move quickly. Stay close to me." As they made their way out of the hut, they were spotted by one of the rival warriors. An alarm was raised, and chaos erupted in the village. Juma and his men fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. Amina stayed close to Juma, using her knowledge of herbs to tend to the wounded as they fought their way through the village. Suddenly, Kofi appeared, his eyes blazing with anger. He confronted Juma, blocking their path. "You will not take her," Kofi growled, drawing his weapon. Juma stood his ground, his eyes locked on Kofi. "She does not belong here. Let us go." Kofi lunged at Juma, and the two men clashed in a fierce battle. Amina watched in horror, torn between the two men she cared about. She knew she had to do something to stop the fight. "Stop!" Amina cried, stepping between them. "This is madness. Kofi, please, remember who you are." Kofi hesitated, his eyes flickering with confusion. "Who am I?" he muttered, lowering his weapon. Amina reached out to him. "You are Kofi, my husband. We were happy together before all of this." Kofi's expression softened, and he seemed to struggle with his memories. But before he could respond, suddenly he said with a voice with rage. "Seize them," he shouted to his men. "You think you can lie to me by saying I'm your husband? Take them away." Juma and Amina were quickly surrounded. Juma fought valiantly, but they were overwhelmed. Amina was captured again, and Juma was taken prisoner. Kofi looked at Amina with a cruel smile. "You will not escape this time," he sneered. Amina and Juma are determined to live and figure out a means to get back to their own time, despite all the odds against them. They think they will never escape as Kofi uses Amina for his own benefit to heal his soldiers. Amina felt a surge of fear and determination. She knew she had to find a way to save Juma and herself. As she was led away, she glanced back at Kofi, hoping that he would remember who he truly was and come to their aid. The look in his eyes was distant, but she held on to a glimmer of hope. Days turned into weeks, and Amina and Juma found themselves trapped in the rival village. Kofi, now fully immersed in his role as the leader, used Amina for his own benefit. He forced her to heal his soldiers, exploiting her skills to maintain his power. Amina felt a deep sense of betrayal, but she remained determined to find a way out. Juma, kept under close watch, never gave up hope. He and Amina would steal moments together, whispering plans and encouraging each other to stay strong. They knew they had to be patient and wait for the right opportunity to escape. One evening, as Amina tended to a wounded soldier, she overheard a conversation between Kofi and someone else as they were planning a raid on her village, intending to capture more resources and people. Amina's heart sank. She knew she had to warn her village and stop the attack. That night, Amina and Juma devised a plan. They would use the chaos of the raid to make their escape. Amina would pretend to cooperate with Kofi, while Juma would gather information and prepare for their departure. The day of the raid arrived. Amina watched as Kofi and his men prepared to leave. She approached Kofi, her heart pounding. "I want to come with you," she said, trying to sound convincing. "I can help with the wounded." Kofi looked at her suspiciously but nodded. "Very well. Stay close to me." As they marched towards her village, Amina kept her eyes on Juma, who was moving stealthily through the ranks. When they reached the outskirts of the village, chaos erupted. The villagers fought back fiercely, and in the confusion, Amina and Juma made their move. They slipped away from the main group, running towards the forest. Kofi noticed their absence and shouted for his men to find them. Amina and Juma ran as fast as they could, their hearts pounding with fear and determination. They reached the stone circle, their only hope of returning to their own time. Amina touched the stone, feeling the familiar dizziness. She grabbed Juma's hand, and together they were pulled through time. Back in the rival village, Kofi was furious. His warriors returned, breathless and empty-handed. "There is no sign of them," one of the men reported. Kofi's face twisted with rage. "Find them," he shouted, his voice echoing through the village. "I want them found." His men scattered, searching the forest and surrounding areas, but Amina and Juma were gone. Kofi's mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and loss. He couldn't understand how Amina had slipped through his grasp, and the thought of her with Juma filled him with anger. Determined to find them, Kofi vowed to search every corner of the land. He would not rest until Amina and Juma were brought back. His obsession grew, and he became relentless in his pursuit. Meanwhile, Amina and Juma opened their eyes to find themselves back and standing in the same spot where Amina had disappeared. They looked around, relieved to be home but wary of what the future held. They knew they had to stay vigilant, as the stones could pull them back at any moment. Amina and Juma were determined to live their lives to the fullest, despite the odds against them. They would face whatever challenges came their way, together. But they also knew that Kofi's determination to find them would not wane. They had to be prepared for anything. As they settled back into their lives, Amina and Juma kept the memory of their adventures close to their hearts. They had faced great dangers and overcame incredible odds, and their bond was stronger than ever. They knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Amina and Juma stood in the familiar surroundings of, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. They had returned to their own time, but they knew that their journey was far from over. The memories of their adventures in 1743 were still fresh, and they were determined to stay vigilant. As they settled back into their lives, Amina and Juma faced new challenges. The world around them was changing rapidly, and they had to adapt to the post-war environment. Resources were scarce, and the village was struggling to rebuild. Amina continued her work as a doctor, as the 90s called her, while Juma found ways to learn new things. This new word of 1999 was all new to him. He couldn't understand the dress code and the new technology. One day, a stranger arrived in the village. He was a historian named Dr. Litchfield, who had heard rumors about the mysterious stone circle. He was fascinated by the stories and wanted to learn more. Amina and Juma were wary of him at first, but they soon realized that he could be an ally. Dr. Litchfield explained that he had been studying ancient artifacts and had come across references to the stone circle. He believed that it held great power and could be used for both good and evil. Amina and Juma shared their experiences with him, and he promised to help them understand the stones better. As they worked together, they discovered that the stones were part of a larger network of ancient sites. These sites were connected by powerful energy lines, and the stones acted as portals through time. Dr. Litchfield warned them that others might seek to exploit this power for their own gain. Meanwhile, Kofi's obsession with finding Amina and Juma grew stronger. He had not given up his search and was determined to use the stones to travel through time once more. He believed that capturing Amina and Juma would give him the power he needed to control the stones and their secrets. No one would be able to go in or out without his permission. Kofi spent countless hours studying the ancient texts and symbols surrounding the stone circle. He became consumed by the desire to unlock its full potential. His mind was filled with visions of power and control, and he was willing to do whatever it took to achieve his goal. One night, as Amina and Juma were discussing their findings with Dr. Litchfield, they heard a strange humming sound. The stone circle began to glow, and they knew that Kofi was trying to come through. They had to act quickly to protect themselves and their village. Amina and Juma, with Dr. Litchfield's help, devised a plan to safeguard the stone circle. They set up protective barriers and traps to prevent anyone from using the stones without their knowledge. They also began training the villagers to defend themselves against any threats. Despite their efforts, Meanwhile Kofi stood before the glowing stones, his eyes burning with determination. He chanted the ancient incantations he had learned, feeling the energy of the stones pulsing around him. The air crackled with electricity as the portal began to open. As Kofi stepped through the portal, he felt a surge of power coursing through his veins. He emerged his eyes scanning the familiar landscape. He knew that Amina and Juma were somewhere nearby, and he was determined to find them. Amina and Juma were unaware of the impending danger. They felt a sense of unease lingered in the air, and Amina couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That evening, as the villagers gathered around the fire, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the flames. The air grew cold, and a hush fell over the crowd. Amina's heart raced as she looked around, sensing a presence in the darkness. Out of the shadows, Kofi appeared, his eyes locked on Amina and Juma. "You thought you could escape me," he said, his voice low and menacing. "But I have found you, and now you will help me unlock the true power of the stones." Amina and Juma stood their ground, their hearts pounding with fear and determination. "We will never help you," Juma said firmly. "The stones are not meant to be controlled by one person." Kofi's eyes narrowed. "You have no choice," he said, stepping closer. "I will do whatever it takes to gain control of the stones, and you will not stand in my way." As Kofi advanced, the villagers rallied around Amina and Juma, ready to defend them. A tense standoff ensued, the air thick with suspense. Amina knew they had to act quickly to protect the village and prevent Kofi from gaining control of the stones. In a desperate bid to stop Kofi, Amina reached for a pouch of herbs she had prepared earlier. She threw the herbs into the fire, creating a thick, blinding smoke. The villagers seized the opportunity to attack, and chaos erupted. Amid the confusion, Amina and Juma slipped away, heading towards the stone circle. They knew they had to find a way to seal the portal and prevent Kofi from using it again. As they reached the stones, they could hear Kofi's enraged shouts behind them. Amina quickly began chanting the incantations she had learned from Dr. Litchfield, hoping to close the portal for good. The stones glowed brighter, and the air hummed with energy. Just as Kofi burst through the smoke, the portal began to close. With a final, desperate effort, Amina and Juma sealed the portal, cutting off Kofi's access to the stones. They were back in 1743. The village was safe, but they knew that Kofi would not give up easily. They had to remain vigilant and protect the stones from anyone who sought to misuse their power. As the villagers celebrated their victory, Amina and Juma stood together, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced great danger and emerged victorious, but they knew that their journey was far from over. They would continue to protect their village and the secrets of the stones, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The moral of the story teaches us the importance of love, courage, and determination. Despite the challenges and dangers they faced, their bond remained unbreakable. They showed that true love can transcend time and space, and that with determination and hope, we can overcome any obstacle. This story reminds us to cherish our loved ones and to never give up on our dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem. Thanks for watching Granny G Stories. For more stories, please subscribe to channel.